Welcome. This is a conversation conducted by Wise Owls and Wise Age as part of a European network called SHARE, in which we are trying to find the experiences of people who are 50 plus and what they think about particular areas of life and discussion. Today's discussion topic is: what are the main changes that each of you around the room think have happened to you and to other women over the last 4 to 5 decades in relation to the following topics? The changes that you've experienced in the economy or society or politics or culture and the media in relation to the existence of people's lives as pensioners, in relation to work, and in particular why you think personally those changes have taken place and whether they're for the good or not. So if I could now move on and ask Margaret to say some words about this.
Hello. Look, it's starting from today. Statistics today tell us that women are now 50% of the workforce, and they're now, I think, the most union members. And when I go back to when I first started work, I left school at 15 and I went into work early. And I remember when the Equal Pay Act came in, I was surprised that I was given a pay rise because I wasn't aware that I was getting paid less than men who were working, doing the same job as me. So already I can see the influence that unions and legislation has had on more equal society.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Barbara.
Hello. I think in terms of the economy and thinking about the time when I was working and the time since I officially retired, although I am still working periodically, certainly when I was working, it was very different having a steady income and knowing exactly that you were going to be earning a certain amount. And I was employed for all of my life from the age of 19 up to 60, and periodically since then. And I think it's very different nowadays for people who lose their jobs and can't get another job after the age of 50. And although one has a reasonable pension, because I worked for a local authority for many years, it's still not enough to do all the things that I would like to do now that I'm retired.
Thanks. Aida.
What I can say is legislation is not enough. I know that we have the Equality Act of, say, I think 2010, and it's probably which means that people can't be discriminated against in terms of age or sex or religion. But on the ground, I think lots of work still needs to be done. Because I think although we can all apply for the same job, and given that I'm 50 plus, I see that I only get part-time jobs on a very irregular basis, so it's very difficult for me to secure a full-time job. But I think media has a lot to do with that because we are obsessed with youth. And although, like I said, legislation is important, on the ground it should be lots of, not networking, but lots of things has to be done to improve things on the ground and to make things better for the older workers, to make them more accepted. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sometimes I've got really mixed feelings about this. Sometimes I look around and I think things have not changed so very much. I look at the government and see how few women there are in it. I looked at the male hierarchical system which still predominates in many companies. I think I felt very privileged. I was the first to go to university in my family, and I've actually been twice, so I was really lucky. But I've also had the struggle of having to care for parents, becoming a single parent and deal with all that, and nursing a sister. Now I think you would get financial support for that. Then you didn't. So it interrupts your career and consequently your pension. So that, you know, is a big legacy. I went a couple of years ago. I went to a project that was taking place in Tate Britain by Suzanne Lacey, an artist, called Silver Action, where they get lots of women, older women, together discussing what they thought it was that they had done to make some equality statement. And that was a really powerful piece of work. But what came out of the Women of the World conference is that younger women feel that they have nobody to go to talk about the big issues that they face, many of which are body image and which they suffer as a result of media pressure. So that's, I feel we need to be supporting younger people a lot.
Thank you. Donald, as a man, can you comment on what you think?
Well,
would be
from a
the main
man's
changes?
aspect, I suppose, one of the things I've noticed is more women coming into engineering, and particularly at the higher levels and in the white-collar area. There are more women bosses, I think, now in engineering. Sorry.
No, sir.
Sorry, what?
Do carry on.
Okay. I think there are probably more women bosses now than there were. That's on the plus side for women. But I notice a couple of things. Women's lib, after being very active, say 20 plus years ago, seems to have levelled off. And there seems to be quite a lot of concern amongst women as to how it should be pursued in the future. The immediate goals having been largely attained with equality of pay and so on, though not necessarily equality of opportunity. On the downside, I think pensions and the situation for older people, and particularly women, is getting worse, mainly because of the shift from one generation paying for the pension of the previous one over to money coming from one generation to pay for their own old age, and the rising retirement age. I think those are the main things.
Thank you. Barbara?
Hi. To pick up on something that Donald said, the area of gender segregation at work, what men's work and women's work, is something I've been interested in. And I worked in the construction industry about 25 years ago as a woman. Now, I think on the professional side, i.e. engineering, architecture, there are a lot more women, at least studying in those areas, although I know in architecture there's a very high percentage of women who don't actually go on to practice or don't go on to practice architecture for very long. But if you look at the craft side, i.e. people working on site or working manually, the situation for women in this country is really a case of, it's not one step forward, two steps back, but it's almost like that. So there's been a sort of occasional initiatives, for instance, in the 70s and 80s, where more women were encouraged to go into craft skills. But now that's fallen by the wayside in a way, and the lack of union involvement in the construction industry hasn't really helped. So although I agree, we see more women bus drivers, and I get a kind of kick of pleasure out of that, and I think, yeah, great, that's something that the women's liberation movement has changed. It's definitely changed the professionals in terms of gender balance. But if we look at, there are certain areas of work, for instance, in construction, and often they're more highly paid blue-collar work, where men really dominate, and women still don't have access to that type of work.
Thank you. Teresa?
Where do I start? Going back over 50 years, if you like. At the beginning, I had no choice. I just had to get a job and go to work. And I would have liked to gone to school to further education. Didn't have the choice. You just had to get on with it and do a job. And I suppose it rankled over the years. I never did that. So I just felt that's one of the things I missed out on. And later in life, I've tried to come to grips with it. And as far as work goes and women, I was highly involved in my trade union, industrial relations and trade union studies. but I was told at the age of 50 that I couldn't get a grant for going on and doing industrial relations and trade union studies because there would be nowhere for me to go afterwards or something like that. You know, you're not going to get a job afterwards or something. So I did proceed on there, and I sort of worked on the situation and never went back to my job at Brunel University because I felt I would like to do something different. So I had a very mundane job, and I was in catering, and it was a case of robbing Peter to pay Paul to just keep the family afloat, and never having enough money to see over the horizon, and never having a career as such. I'm only really thinking about it. It's all happened late in life. I don't know why that is. People have asked me to do certain things, and I feel, yes, but it's a bit late to have a career at, in the late 70s, if you like, and make use of it. But at the same time, I will pursue any initiative or things I get offered. But over the years, I've sort of been involved with the equal pay for equal work. Women's part of the women's movement, the trade union movement. I was secretary of the London Women's Advisory of NUPI, and also was highly involved with the Labour Party and Women's Unit and various other things like that. But it all seems like quite a long time ago now. And although those contacts I made then have some relevance today, but as far as women and local, young women in particular, go, the situation has not really changed. And in some ways it's gone backwards. They're saying that we've won this and we've won that, but women are still having to manage on nothing and trying to keep the family afloat. I was really upset yesterday when I saw in the paper a woman took her own life and the life of her 2 children because she couldn't manage. Well, I think that was the situation. And I thought it's really, really sad that people are committing suicide because of the way things are. And it's not just in this country, it's worldwide. It's a global issue. And it's a different agenda from what it was 50 years ago, but at the same time it's still happening.
If I can follow that up in a more general discussion way, what role do you think women themselves played in any changes, whether they've been positive or negative changes? There are people who would argue that all you have to do is to sit back and allow legislatures, largely male, to come along and make new laws up and give you your freedoms, and that's what will change things. It would seem to me that the whole history of all equality and change has been because people themselves have, both on their own behalf and in solidarity with others, tried to affect change. What do you think, from your experience, has worked, and to what degree was it women who made these changes?
I think women did make a lot of the changes, but I feel with the Thatcher years, somehow or other we had a stamp down on history, and it feels as if things that happened during that time weren't transmitted to younger generations. So the younger generations don't know that the battles some of these battles have already been fought, and I think that they're quite at sea as a result of that.
Anyone else on this?
Well, I think the battle for equal pay, for instance, all these battles have been incredibly hard fought, mainly by women, and the only reason there's been any legislation is because of that battle. And yeah.
I mean, a lot of you have referred to trade unions and the work you did in the trade unions. How do you think you managed to change trade unions from being really representing predominantly men back in the 50s and 60s into organisations that now would seem, at least some of the time, to be in favour of gender equality?
I would say it's about increasing numbers of women in the workforce. Then you have more voice because there are more of you. And when I spoke earlier about the Equal Pay Act, yes, I was delighted when that act came in. But actually today, even though we have that act, women still earn on average less than £5,000 less than men for across the board. So while we've got the legislation, we still don't have their whole equality.
Okay, I think that's, unless anybody's got anything final to say, yes.
On a brief point, I think women's responsibilities are much broader than they ever used to be, and they have more work in terms of childcare, house care, and trying to hold down a job and be educated. And I think I see so many women run ragged trying to fulfil those roles.
I mean, I think I can say from the Wise Owl perspective that what we have realised across Europe now is that you can't separate age and poverty from gender. Is that actually largely because so many women have been forced into spending a lot of their working time caring and not therefore getting the same level of income to save up, not getting the same level of pensions. That's the reason that there's now 1 million single women living in poverty above pensionable age in this country. And I think if we're going to change anything around age equality, we have to recognise that it's also age and gender equality, which, thank goodness, I think Age Platform Europe has been at least trying to push strongly.
On the subject of women and pensions, I only got a very small pension, about 32 or 36 pounds a week. And
On top of the state pension.
no, that was it.
That was it.
So I couldn't really, although we were having problems at home, I couldn't really leave home at the time, thinking I can't manage on this. But in the end, because I've been on a special diet and having conflicts and behavioural problems with my husband and various other things, that I decided I couldn't take it anymore, and that I left and went into safe house for a while. And that was the only way I could crack the system, if you like, of because we were about £1 over the limit for benefits, to claim any benefits and to get a more pension. So I had to have that help in order to get out of the situation I was in. And also I brought up 6 children and sort of wait for them to leave home and that sort of thing. So it's a question of where your ambitions, but where your life takes you in some ways. Do you, and somebody said to me, better the devil you know. I said, yeah. So I couldn't deal with it, because I don't give in, I just fight it to the death, if you like. But I just felt like it was going nowhere. And if I wanted to do something in later life, then I had to do something about it, even if it was a drastic getting out of that.
Do you think that the changes when there were, for example, because safe houses only, to my understanding, came through in the sort of late 60s, do you think that was because of women taking direct action, or how much has it been because, say, women in politics have been affecting legislative change?
A lot of that came around because of women's centres being established, and the women's centres themselves not engineered, but put into action a lot of these changes by saying, here we have a safe place for women. We can fill you into getting a place to go, or if you have to go to a safe house or a women's refuge or whatever, because there is a difference. and so on. It was having that place to go to talk to somebody about all the problems they had, and being able to get legal advice in doing that. That was the turning point for a lot of women.
It was having a choice, wasn't it? It was
Yes,
the first time
yes.
had any sort of choice.
But of course, that centre had to be run by women, and a lot of them didn't get any funding until the GLC was in, and they were able to get a grant to run a women's centre. So it was all these little bits of legislation did help, but they didn't solve the problem. And all these people that came out and said that this needs to be done, and they would be there for any help, any support that people needed. That was the crucial matter at that time.
And those places were not
I know.
great places. I
No.
volunteered in one. They were
No.
tough, actually.
They were. They were very tough. I was quite lucky, but there were a couple of times when I was attacked. But anyway, to move on from that situation, I just feel like, yes, but it needs a movement to be able, everybody working together, not just women, but women and men, to say, this is not right, I'm not accepting it, and we need to do something about it. That's what is missing these days, I feel. That people, we've got the travel pass, we've got our freedom pass, as it's called, but nobody realises all the work that came out of getting that pass. They said if that was taken away, there'd be a riot.
I
But
think people often don't know the reality of other people's
No,
lives.
they
I
don't.
live up below the poverty line.
yeah,
I don't know how you do now, but people don't understand what that
No.
actually means in terms
Yeah.
of money. And,
that's
you
right.
know, and I think that we need to open channels of communication so people can have direct conversations about subjects like this without feeling frightened, intimidated, and it would be good for everybody.
Okay, I
I'd like
think
to speak a little bit more about the current situation, because we're in the period of austerity and we've only just started on that. And already I think 600,000 jobs in the public sector have been cut, and apparently it's going to be 1 million before the next election. And those jobs are predominantly women's jobs.
well, they're also predominantly 50 plus, even more than women.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so we've got this is our future, so this is our call to action, because it's not just loss of jobs. Lost my thread now, sorry. Sorry.
Could I just sort of say on that, that it would appear that where you have mass action and where you have people prepared to take individual action, then it will work eventually, however hard it is. But I think the point that was made earlier on, that the generation since have not been reminded of the history of successful struggle by working people and by women and by ethnic minorities and by gay people, and that a lot of the situation that exists now, people don't appreciate how far back things have gone in terms of liberty. Neither do they appreciate that the benefits a lot of people have got is been as a result of mass direct action. And I think if that message from our generation can percolate down to younger ones, that will be something positive that we can
It was really
contribute.
interesting, at these two big conferences I went to where people were talking directly across the age divide. 18-year-olds who are having big problems in their own lives, you know, anorexia, bulimia, God knows what else. Talking to people in their 60s and 70s who'd already gone through and looked at a lot of those issues. We need more of it. We just need more of those conversations. And, you know, I think that the thing is, we're the people who have to lead them, because the young just don't know. They haven't been there.
And isn't it also with Thatcher, didn't she say that there's no such thing as society? So I think lots of people who are the younger ones, they grew up as more individual Thatcherite people. It's all about me and accumulation and consumer consuming things and being identified by labels. So there's no collective action, and we see ourselves as individuals. So that's sort of become ingrained in our minds, or of the youth, I think, and I think that's quite hard to fight with the with adverts and the movies and the media, which is they play a big role, and they sort of divide people and split it along immigrants versus the locals and all of that. So it's compounds the problem. And
Okay, well look, thank you very much for that discussion, and hopefully we'll have another one on a different topic soon.